The underground root cellar system. First up, let's talk about the root cellar. To us, it's a place to stash potatoes, but to them, it was an ingenious climate control system. It was a foundation of survival, helping to preserve anywhere from 500 to 800 pounds of food for 6 to 8 months. Building a root cellar was a massive engineering effort. Pioneers had to dig 8 to 10 feet deep, down to the Earth's stable thermal temperature. To build a standard 8 by 10 foot cellar, they had to remove nearly 400 cubic feet of soil. An extraordinary amount of work done entirely with a pick and shovel. The walls were constructed from 18-inch thick fieldstone using a dry stone technique. This method required shaping each rock to interlock tightly, without relying entirely on mortar for structural integrity. Any mortar used was typically a local mix of clay, sand, and chopped straw in a 3 to 2 to 1 ratio. The key was climate control. This system maintained a stable temperature of 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 to 4 degrees Celsius, year-round, and an ideal high humidity of 85 to 95% 90%. This was achieved through a 2-pipe ventilation system. They used 2 hollowed 4-inch oak pipes, one placed near the floor to draw cold air in, and the other near the ceiling to vent warm air out. These pipes extended 2 feet above ground and were wrapped in steel mesh to keep out vermin. Inside, food was carefully arranged. Potatoes were stored in slatted-bottom wooden bins for air circulation, while apples were individually wrapped in newspaper. Crucially, there was a double-door system. The outer door was 2-inch thick oak, and the inner door was separated by a 3-foot-thick airlock chamber that stopped warm air from entering during the winter. Wooden door latches prevented freezing, and leather hinges maintained flexibility in the cold. The root cellar panic room. The root cellar, ostensibly a place for food storage, was actually often designed as a family bunker. It was used to defend against raids by Native Americans, outlaws, and any other threat. For example, the Henderson family outside Abilene built their 1878 cellar with 3-foot-thick rock walls. It featured a secret vent disguised as a drain pipe and enough space for 7 people to hide for 3 days. The entrance was covered by a highly realistic-looking fake woodpile that could be moved in less than 30 seconds. The most terrifying detail that shows the desperation of pioneer life is that these cellars featured small holes drilled at eye level, just big enough to poke a rifle barrel through. Families would hide underground, listening to the ransacking above, waiting for the perfect moment to start shooting up through the floorboards. The truly brutal part is that children as young as 5 were trained to sprint to these cellars at the first sign of trouble. No crying, no questions. Just run and hide until their parents signaled safety. The chimney heat exchange system. If a modern fireplace warms one room, the pioneer fireplace was a complex heat recovery system. It worked on the principle of thermal mass. The central chimney could measure 4 by 6 feet at the base, constructed from fieldstone and featuring multiple flue channels to serve different heating areas. The fireplace foundation extended 3 feet below ground and 2 feet out from the chimney base, using 50 to 100-pound foundation boulders. The chimney walls were 18 inches thick at the base, tapering to 12 inches at the roofline. The heat exchange mechanism was embedded in this massive structure. The sheer mass of stone absorbed heat during the burn and then radiated warmth out for 8 to 12 hours after the fire went out. Inside, baffles made of flat stone diverted hot gases through serpentine paths, maximizing heat transfer before the exhaust escaped. There were also multiple fireplace openings, a main 4-foot wide hearth for maximum heat generation, and smaller 2 feet by 18 inches side openings placed in bedrooms, each with its own flue channel. Flat iron damper systems controlled airflow and heat distribution. For cooking, a bake oven was integrated into the chimney structure, 3 feet deep and 4 feet wide, with a vaulted ceiling to promote even heat circulation. Advanced systems even included iron pipes running through the chimney structure to heat water, connected to cisterns near the kitchen, providing hot water without a separate heating system. The sleeping alcove warming system. Pioneer homes lacked central heating, so bedrooms were specialized thermal zones designed to concentrate body heat. The sleeping alcove created a microclimate, maintaining a comfortable temperature even when main areas dropped below freezing. This 6 by 8 foot sleeping area was built recessed, adjacent to the main chimney flue to maximize radiant heat transfer. The alcove was enclosed on 3 sides with walls 18 inches higher than the bed platform, forming a heat trap that prevented warm air from escaping. The bed platform was raised 12 to 18 inches from the floor, capturing rising warm air. Built with thick oak planks on heavy beams, the space beneath also stored bedding and provided extra insulation from the cold floor. The curtain system was crucial. Heavy wool or canvas curtains were drawn across the opening, creating an enclosed sleeping chamber. Curtains hung by iron rings on wooden rods with overlapping panels to eliminate gaps. Ventilation was managed through small ceiling vents with wooden shutters, operated by a rope and pulley system. This prevented carbon dioxide buildup while maintaining warmth. Sleeping mattresses were often stuffed with straw, corn husks, or feathers, covered by wool blankets and fur robes, providing insulation equivalent to modern anti-freeze sleeping bags. The multi-level storage loft system. The upstairs loft wasn't just storage. It was a multi-level climate control system that utilized the home's natural thermal stratification. The main loft was situated 8 to 10 feet above the ground floor and accessed by a split wood ladder with 12-inch spaced rungs. The loft floor was constructed with 2 by 8-inch oak planks and rated for heavy load capacity 50 to 75 pounds per square foot. Storage areas were organized by temperature requirements. The section directly over the fireplace, the warmest spot, was reserved for drying herbs and preserving seeds that needed protection from freezing. Cooler areas on the outer edges stored preserved meats, leather goods, and tools. Grain storage was done in tightly sealed oak barrels to deter mice. Each barrel, measuring about 3 by 4 by 2 feet, held 8 to 10 bushels of grain, and importantly, they were raised 6 inches on timbers to prevent moisture damage and allow air to circulate underneath. The loft also served as sleeping space for children or laborers, with pads placed in the warmest areas near the chimney. These pads, made of canvas or wool stuffed with straw or corn husks, provided floor insulation and were easy to move for cleaning. Ventilation was controlled by adjustable wooden shutters in the gable ends, operated by a rope and pulley system from the ground floor, allowing temperature adjustments without climbing the ladder. The electrified fence. Long before wires carried real electricity, frontier families came up with their own electric fence. Of course, it wasn't powered by lightning in a line, but the effect was just as shocking. Settlers built mechanical systems along the edge of their property that could jolt an intruder with sudden force. They relied on a mix of springs, counterweights, and hidden levers. Touch the wrong post or try to climb over, and the mechanism snapped to life. A heavy arm might whip forward, or a weighted beam could slam down, leaving bruises, or worse. The idea wasn't always to kill, it was to make anyone who dared think twice about coming back. Think about the desperation behind this. Families were so worried about trespassers, wild animals, or outright thieves that they turned the very boundary of their land into a trap. These fences weren't just property lines, they were warnings. Cross here and you'll regret it. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. The rifle rest windowsill. If you look at any authentic pioneer home photograph, you'll notice something strange. The windowsills are unusually wide and carved with specific grooves. This wasn't decoration. They were rifle rests designed to turn every window into a sniper position. The grooves were carved to perfectly fit the barrels of specific rifles, often a Winchester, 1873, or a Springfield trapdoor. A person could brace their weapon, sight down the barrel, and get a stable shot at anything approaching the house from 200 yards away. But what makes this feature terrifying is that they were angled slightly downward. This was perfect for shooting at horseback riders or anyone trying to crawl up close to the house. Pioneer families weren't just defending their homes, they were turning them into military fortifications. The most complex example was the Garrett Ranch near El Paso, where every window had a custom rifle rest carved for different family members. Even 12-year-old Billy Garrett had his own groove designed for his youth rifle. The outhouse arsenal. You might think the outhouse was just for daily business, but on the frontier, it sometimes became the most surprising defensive spot on the property. Those little wooden walls weren't only for privacy. Some families cut small openings that looked like vents but worked as lookout points. If trouble came, a settler could slip out, circle around, and suddenly the outhouse gave them the perfect angle to defend their land. One rancher near Dodge City even joked that if he had to face danger out there, he wasn't going down alone. It made a strange kind of sense. The outhouse usually sat far from the main house, giving a wide, clear view of anyone creeping up. And honestly, most bandits wouldn't bother searching the smelliest spot on the farm. In the end, this simple building became an unlikely shield. Gross, yes, but on the frontier, every structure had to serve more than one purpose. The window weight weapons. Old frontier houses often used counterweights to open and close sash windows. But families didn't always see them as simple hardware. In their eyes, those heavy chunks of iron could become the perfect backup weapon. Some settlers reshaped them into clubs, while others attached chains so they could swing like makeshift flails. Stories even spread of families swapping the weights for hidden surprises, turning an ordinary window into a nasty shock for anyone trying to break in. The idea was simple. If intruders forced their way through, that weight could drop fast and hit hard. It was a mix of household necessity and frontier paranoia, proof that even the most ordinary parts of a home could be reimagined for survival. The Indian trading window. On the side of most pioneer homes was an ordinary-looking window, but look closely and you'd spot strange features. Thick iron bars, a small shelf built into the sill, and a wooden slot just big enough to pass items through. This was the trading window. It served a purpose that was commercial, diplomatic, and survival strategic. When Native Americans approached to trade, which happened far more often than Hollywood suggests, families could conduct business without opening the main door or exposing themselves. Flour, coffee, and tobacco were passed out through the slot, and furs, jewelry, and sometimes information were passed back. Martha Stevenson, a settler near San Antonio, conducted thousands of dollars worth of trade through her window between 1881 and 1889. She even learned enough Apache to negotiate prices and receive warnings about hostile groups moving through the area. This shows the complex relationships on the frontier. These windows often became unofficial communication centers. Native Americans would leave messages, draw maps in the dirt, or signal safe routes. It wasn't always conflict. Sometimes it was about cooperative survival. The false floor cache. Under the floorboards of many pioneer homes lay a secret that could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Families built hidden caches into false floors, not just to hide valuables, but to store what they needed to survive. A well-planned cache might hold preserved food, medicine, spare clothes, and a few days' supply of water. Some families went further, tucking away weapons, coins, or even documents in case they had to run. Sarah McKinney, a widow near Fort Worth, was said to have 7 such spots: food beneath the kitchen, ammunition under her bedroom, and silver beneath the parlor. What stands out is how carefully these hiding places were arranged. They could be reached in total darkness. Each family member knew exactly how many steps to take, which board to lift, and how to close it again without leaving a trace. On the frontier, if raiders found one stash, it almost always meant there were more hidden nearby. The trapdoor kitchen. Most frontier kitchens had a detail that would never pass inspection today: a trapdoor built right into the floor. At first glance, it looked like a shortcut to the cellar, but in truth, it was a lifeline. Kitchens were the busiest spot in the house. Fires glowed there at night, visible for miles, and the smell of cooking often drew attention. That made them the most vulnerable rooms of all. With a trapdoor, families could vanish in seconds. Some were hidden under loose planks, others under a table heavy enough to disguise the opening. In certain homes, counterweights even helped the door swing shut behind them once everyone was safe. The clever part was where the tunnels led. They didn't stop at the cellar. They branched out toward barns, outhouses, and even neighboring homes. It meant a family could slip out of sight and reappear somewhere safer, without ever stepping into open ground. The chimney shooting platform. That brick chimney might look ordinary, but on the frontier, it sometimes doubled as a lookout tower. Many chimneys were said to hide features more fitting for a castle than a cabin. Inside, reachable through the fireplace, iron rungs could lead to a narrow perch just beneath the roof. From up there, a person had a clear view of the land around them. Small openings in the brick gave a line of sight outward, and a few families even added hooks to hang gear or water. The chimney also became a tool for signals. Settlers could send columns of smoke to warn neighbors. White meant visitors or traders, black meant danger. If someone saw a neighbor climbing into their chimney with a rifle, that was the cue to prepare. One of the most elaborate examples came from the Thompson place near Amarillo. Their chimney reportedly had 3 firing ledges, a rope ladder for quick escape, and even a hidden stash of supplies tucked inside. The double-wall secret room. Many pioneer homes had simple one-room appearances, but inside, families constructed something that would make modern contractors weep: double walls with hidden rooms built between them. These secret spaces were often 3 feet wide and ran the entire length of the house. Access was through hidden panels disguised as part of the wall decor or furniture. This space was used for everything from concealing valuables and stashing weapons to hiding family members during raids. Some families even built miniature living areas complete with bedding, food, and chamber pots. The most incredible part is that these secret rooms often had their own ventilation system. and even tiny concealed windows on the exterior of the house. From the outside, you'd never know there was a second living space inside the walls. The Reynolds family near Denver built one so elaborate that it had its own fireplace with a flue connecting into the main chimney, making outside detection impossible. The suicide porch. At first glance, a front porch on a pioneer home looked like a simple place to sit and greet visitors. But some porches had a darker purpose. They were built to collapse on command. The idea was harsh but effective. If troublemakers gathered at the front door, families could knock out the supports and send them crashing down. In some tales, settlers even dug pits beneath, turning the porch into a hidden trap. Stories got wilder with time. One ranch near Tombstone was said to have wired its porch to blow apart in an instant. Whether all of these accounts were true or stretched by frontier storytelling, they reveal just how desperate people felt. Out on the edge of civilization, even the porch wasn't just decoration. It was another line of defense. Out of these bizarre features, which one do you find the most insane? Share it in the comments. The collapsible staircase. Two-story houses on the frontier sometimes had a trick hidden in plain sight: staircases built to vanish. Unlike modern construction, these stairs weren't locked into the frame. They rested on pins and braces that could be pulled free in seconds. One tug, and the whole staircase dropped away, sealing the upper floor and turning it into a fortress. But families didn't stop there. Some steps doubled as storage, with compartments built into each tread. Inside, they kept spare food, tools, or ammunition for an emergency. When the stairs came down, supplies were right at hand. One story from the Henderson family near Dallas describes a staircase so advanced it could be rebuilt from above. Using a pulley system, they could lower the pieces back into place or swing them out as a bridge to a second-story window. The escape tunnel bed. While we've talked about collapsible staircases, some homes focused on individual escape. Bedrooms were often built flush against the wall, but look beneath the bed and you might discover the ultimate escape route: tunnels leading directly from the bedroom to outside safety. The bed was built on a platform with a hidden trapdoor underneath. Families could roll out of bed and vanish through the floor, emerging hundreds of yards from the house. These tunnels were engineering marvels, with proper ventilation, structural support, and multiple exit points. Some connected to neighbors' houses, barns, or natural caves. The true genius is that they were designed to self-collapse behind the escapee. Once the family was out, they could trigger a cave-in, making pursuit impossible. The weaponized well. Every pioneer family needed a well for drinking water, but some turned it into something far more dramatic. The well wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was sometimes described as a hidden stronghold. Beneath the surface, false bottoms could conceal secret chambers where families kept supplies, food, or even weapons for emergencies. Frontier stories tell of wells that doubled as traps. One wrong step on the cover, and it might give way, dropping an intruder deep into the shaft. Even if someone survived the fall, climbing out would have been nearly impossible. Some tales go further, saying settlers reinforced the walls to keep trespassers from escaping. The Patterson family near Abilene was remembered for building one of the most elaborate wells of all. According to accounts, it contained multiple hidden rooms, a passage back into the house, and even a system to flood the area if danger approached. Whether every detail is fact or frontier folklore, one thing is certain: water was life, and families would go to incredible lengths to protect it from anyone who dared to interfere. The floor furnace trap. Most pioneer homes heated with stoves or fireplaces, but some featured something that was both a heating system and a medieval torture device: a floor furnace with a removable iron grate. The furnace was built flush into the floor, with a heavy iron grate covering the opening. Remove the grate and you had a 6-foot deep pit full of glowing coals and red-hot flames. Families would place these furnaces near the front door or in hallways where intruders were likely to pass. In the dark, a person could easily step onto what looked like solid floor and plummet into the fire pit. A detail that shows the meticulous planning of pioneer defense. These grates were designed with a quick-release mechanism that could be operated from across the room. Pull a hidden cord, and the floor would open up right under the intruder's feet. The bulletproof Bible corner. In nearly every pioneer home, one corner of the main room was reserved for the family Bible. To a visitor, it looked like a simple stand for scripture, but in some houses that corner doubled as protection. The stand itself could be reinforced with layers of wood, iron, or even stone, turning it into a shield. There are stories of Bibles hollowed out to hide a tiny pistol, tucked away for emergencies. The setup was clever in its placement too. That corner faced the main door, letting the head of the house sit and read while also guarding the entrance. Some families took the idea even further, reinforcing the entire corner as a hidden stronghold. Behind religious symbols, small openings gave them a line of sight outside. It was a mix of faith and frontier caution, prayer and protection sharing the very same space. The kitchen knife launcher. Frontier kitchens weren't only for stews and bread, they sometimes carried a darker reputation. The knife rack, which should have been just storage, was rumored to act like a strange launching device. Stories tell of racks set with hidden springs, able to send knives flying with the pull of a trigger. Some accounts even claim that families swapped out everyday utensils for special blades, turning the kitchen into an unlikely stronghold. True or not, it shows how even the most ordinary room was imagined as part of survival. The chamber pot bomb. Every pioneer home had a chamber pot for nightly needs, but families discovered that these innocent ceramic receptacles could be turned into weapons of destruction. The pot would be filled with a mixture of gunpowder, nails, broken glass, and anything else that could cause damage. A simple fuse would turn it into a hand grenade that could be tossed from a window or dropped through the floor. The perverse genius of this weapon is that outlaws would never suspect a chamber pot. They might pick it up looking for valuables and receive an extremely explosive surprise. The best example is a widow near Tombstone, who had 6 different pots rigged throughout her house. Each had a different trigger mechanism, and she could detonate them all with one pull of a hidden cord. The poisoned doorknob. Some frontier households used chemical tricks in their defenses. Doorknobs and handles were coated with substances meant to incapacitate anyone who touched them. Historic accounts suggest those compounds were drawn from wild plants or homemade mixtures. A thin film on metal could pass to skin on touch. The real risk was accidental exposure. The family had to keep track of treated fittings. So, households marked surfaces clearly and kept strict cleaning routines to prevent accidental self-harm. If you lived in the 1880s Wild West, do you think you'd dare live in a house with these bizarre traps? The decoy house. The ultimate frontier defense tactic was building an entirely fake house nearby. This was a decoy home designed to attract intruders while the real family hid in the actual reinforced house. These decoy homes were filled with worthless items made to look valuable. This ensured that the robbers would waste time looting the wrong house, giving the real family time to prepare for battle or escape. This tactic of misdirection worked alongside other psychological strategies. An intruder who believed the family was stronger than they really were, or that the property was somewhere else, often turned away without testing the truth. The speaking tube system. While we've seen many hard defenses, coordination was paramount. To achieve this, pioneer families used speaking tubes made from hollowed-out logs. These tubes connected the main rooms to the loft, root cellar, and other defensive positions, allowing defensive coordination without having to expose themselves. The use of speaking tubes allowed family members to quickly relay danger status, intruder locations, and coordinate movements. This was especially critical in the dark or under siege. Families often developed private voice codes to communicate status and coordinate movements, ensuring sensitive information wasn't understood by the enemy if they happened to overhear. Additionally, this communication system was part of the escape routes. Speaking tubes could connect to hidden exits via the root cellar, allowing family members to regroup behind natural cover like rocks or vegetation, where they could stage a final defense. The water collection and filtration system. Pioneer homes included water management systems that used natural materials and gravity distribution, ensuring a reliable supply when other sources froze or became contaminated. The rainwater harvesting system used split log gutters, 6 inches wide and 4 inches deep, placed along the roofline. Gutters were sloped 1 inch every 10 feet toward collection points and lined with pine pitch to prevent leaks. The filtration process involved 3 stages. Stage 1 used wooden barrels to settle sediment for 24 hours. Stage 2 filtered through layers of sand, charcoal, and gravel in slatted bottom wooden boxes. Stage 3 was the most crucial, using hardwood charcoal, often oak or maple, ground into pea-sized fragments and layered 6 inches thick between layers of sand and gravel. This charcoal was produced by burning wood in oxygen-restricted environments, creating activated carbon that absorbed impurities and improved flavor. This entire system could process 10 to 15 gallons of water per day. Water was stored in multiple wooden barrels at different elevations to create natural water pressure flow to the kitchen and laundry areas. For winter protection, cisterns were often placed near the main chimney so radiant heat kept the temperature above freezing, and the hollowed log pipes were insulated with straw and thick cloth. The smokehouse and preservation chamber. To maintain a meat supply for 8 to 12 months without refrigeration, pioneer families built a smokehouse, a sophisticated food preservation facility integrated with the home's heating and ventilation system. The smoke chamber typically measured 6 by 8 by 10 feet, with thick walls of stone or heavy timber, plastered with clay mortar for an airtight environment. Inside, multiple tiers of wooden racks were placed 18 inches apart, holding 300 to 500 pounds of meat during peak preservation. The genius, however, was in the smoke creation. Smoke was generated from a separate external firebox, built of stone and featuring a removable iron grate. Hot smoke was channeled through an underground pipe to cool the smoke down to the optimal temperature of 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 to 32 degrees Celsius, for the cold smoking technique. Wood selection was critical. Hickory provided the strongest preservation and flavor for pork and beef, apple or cherry wood for poultry and fish, while maple offered excellent flavor for smaller cuts. Before smoking, the meat was salt cured. Meat was covered in coarse salt mixed with brown sugar and spices, 1 pound of salt for every 10 pounds of meat, for 24 to 48 hours. Cold smoking usually lasted 2 to 4 weeks, with the fire maintained for 12 to 16 hours daily. These were 30 strange, dangerous, and ingenious features of Wild West homes, designs so extreme they could only exist on the American frontier. These houses weren't just shelters, they were machines for living. As frontier carpenter Samuel Mackenzie wrote in 1847, "A home is not only a shelter, it is a survival machine that must work when everything else fails." These long-forgotten features prove that the best technology isn't always the newest. Sometimes it's the wisdom tested by time and proven through survival. Life in the Wild West wasn't won by gunfighters in the street. It was won by families who turned their homes into medieval-style fortresses, surviving by being more inventive, more cautious, and sometimes more dangerous than anyone who dared to threaten them. Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen, rides armed on her horse after her 1886 release for horse theft. Dressed elegantly, she carried weapons, blending grace with danger. Steamboat, the legendary rodeo horse too wild to tame, became Wyoming's symbol. Its rearing shape still marks state license plates, embodying the untamed spirit of the West. In 1885, Geronimo fled Arizona's San Carlos Reservation with 38 Apaches, crossing deserts into Mexico while pursued by thousands of soldiers. He surrendered a year later, ending Apache resistance. During that escape, 11-year-old Jimmy McKinney was captured in Arizona. After months with the Apaches, he cried when rescued, wishing to remain with the tribe that had embraced him. A rare photo shows the Wild Bunch gang outside a saloon. Butch Cassidy seated, Harry Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, standing. Together, they terrorized banks and trains. Even at 60, Annie Oakley amazed audiences by shooting a coin balanced on her dog's head, proving her skill was no mere trick. In Miles City, Montana, 2 prostitutes pose in a richly decorated brothel. With just 1,000 residents, the town was notorious for having more saloons and brothels than churches, a reflection of its lawless spirit. Mabel Hackney Tompkins wowed crowds in Ponca City, leaping her horse skyrocket over a table. At the time, daring women riders were rising stars in traveling shows across the frontier. With her hat and rifle in hand, Pearl Hart carried out a bold stagecoach robbery in Arizona in 1899. Disguised as a man, she became one of the rare women outlaws of the West. Afterward, she was arrested and photographed in Yuma with a prison tag. Pearl gained fame, gave interviews, and was freed a few years later for good behavior. Around the campfire, cowboys listened to the chief tell stories. Nights on the range were filled with talk of storms, missing cattle, and brushes with danger. Market hunters played a vital role in westward expansion, supplying meat, pelts, and land knowledge. Living in isolation for months, they traded with posts and tribes to survive. A rare image shows Billy the Kid playing croquet, offering a glimpse of his ordinary side. Even as a fugitive, he joined local social gatherings between clashes in New Mexico. In 1898, at the White Dog Saloon in Fort Worth, a man pulls a gun. Scenes like this sparked the Anti-Saloon League, America's first modern lobbying group, demanding alcohol prohibition. Nietzsche and Geronimo stand together at Fort Bowie in 1886. Soon after, both leaders of Apache resistance were sent as prisoners of war to Florida. Between whiskey mugs, marked cards, and pistols on laps, saloon games carried constant tension. Bluffing came with the risk of sudden gunfire. Tilly Baldwin wowed rodeo crowds by performing acrobatics on a galloping horse. One misstep meant being crushed by an 800-pound animal. Manhattan, Nevada looks like a Western movie, but it was real. Its main street filled with settlers, barrels, stores, and smoke. Mining made such towns boom in the early 1900s. On horseback in snowy Montana, two Absaroka men sit quietly near a teepee. As nomads of the Great Plains, they mastered survival even through the region's brutal winters. In late 19th century North Dakota, a farmhouse roof is decorated with elk skulls, a frontier tradition that gave homes character while using what the land provided. The Pony Express station in St. Joseph, Missouri, launched messages bound for California, reaching the coast in as little as 10 days. Riders, often thin young men under 18, galloped 120 miles per shift, swapping horses at stations. A famous poster sought orphans willing to risk death daily for $25 a week. Saloons like this were social centers, pouring whiskey stronger and cheaper than on the East Coast. Many brewed their own liquor in basements. Armed with pistols and fueled by whiskey, men battled in the bloody Lincoln County War of 1878. Bravado, liquor, and gunpowder turned the conflict into one of the Wild West's most violent chapters. The Buffalo Soldiers of the 10th Cavalry posed proudly at Fort Apache in 1890. Despite prejudice, these black soldiers braved snow, scarcity, and attacks on the toughest frontiers, carrying out missions few others would dare. Butch Cassidy's gang posed for a photo in Fort Worth before robbing trains and banks. Ironically, the image gave the Pinkertons exactly what they needed to track them nationwide. In Skagway around 1900, pioneers tried training moose to haul loads. The idea quickly failed. The animals were far too stubborn for the job. In a saloon around 1915, men shoot pool and play cards, blending gambling with leisure. On the wall hangs a Buffalo Bill poster, tying the scene to frontier legend. Pat Garrett became famous in 1881 for killing Billy the Kid in New Mexico. Once a friend of the outlaw, he became the sheriff who hunted him down, entering history with a single shot. Big Nose Kate, Doc Holliday's companion, was a strong and independent woman who also worked as a nurse and ran a saloon. She was the only one who stayed with Holliday until his final days. A photo shows four men playing cards, one possibly Billy the Kid. Though debated, if authentic, it offers a rare glimpse of the outlaw in an unguarded moment. Crazy Horse, the great Lakota leader, led warriors to victory at Little Bighorn in 1876, luring Custer's 7th Regiment into a deadly ambush and destroying it. The Bob Saloon in Miles City, Montana was a must-stop for cowboys and hunters. Such saloons poured stiff liquor, hosted illegal games, and often doubled as post offices. In 1907, Okanogan, Washington, a cow carried 7 children to school each day. In rural areas with little transport, this unusual routine became a daily necessity. Annie Oakley demonstrates her skill on horseback in 1890. Famous for shooting coins out of the air, she became a star of Buffalo Bill's shows and a trailblazer for women. Doc Holliday, once a trained dentist, turned to gunslinging after contracting tuberculosis. Fighting beside Wyatt Earp at the OK Corral, he gained fame for his deadly accuracy and icy composure in duels. Laura Bullion, called the Outlaw Girl, rode with Butch Cassidy's gang. At just 25, she took part in the Great Northern Train Robbery before being captured in 1901. Inside a Wyoming saloon, cowboys fire at a man's feet to make him dance, while the bartender threatens the room with a German Mauser. Just another rowdy night in the Wild West. A train snakes along the Buckhorn Mountains in South Dakota, carrying settlers west. Railroads built towns and delivered supplies to even the most remote corners. Many former slaves moved west after the Civil War seeking freedom and steady work on cattle ranches. Most cowboys rode horses borrowed from their employers, as few could afford their own. Texas Jack Jr., photographed around 1885, carried on the legacy of the famed Texas Jack. Performing in Buffalo Bill-style shows, he also gave Will Rogers his very first stage. One rare photo shows Wyatt Earp with his wife Josephine in old age at their Happy Days mine in Arizona. Far from gunfights, they lived quietly by the river, still hoping to strike gold. In Randsburg, California, a miner built his home into the ground with stone and clay. During the gold rush, many dug such houses to conserve lumber and escape the desert heat. In downtown Bingham Canyon, Utah, bars and saloons crowded alongside churches and markets. Despite Utah's religious image, its main street was alive with business, whiskey, and mud. Crossing Death Valley in the 1870s demanded grit and stamina. Long wagons drawn by 20 mules hauled tons of borax beneath a blazing sun in one of America's harshest landscapes. Custer's 1874 expedition crossed the Dakota Territory with wagons and troops, discovering gold in the Black Hills. This sparked broken treaties with the Lakotas and fueled conflict. Washakie, a Shoshone leader, stood out as one of the few who pursued peace with whites while preserving dignity. By signing treaties, he secured land for his people in Wyoming. Comanche, the horse of the 7th Cavalry, was the only survivor of the 1876 Battle of the Little Bighorn, where Lakotas and Cheyennes crushed Custer's troops. Wounded, he was nursed back to health and honored until his death. In 1909, Childress, Texas, bustled with wagons loaded with cotton, the South's white gold. Weekly fairs like this fueled the rural economy and drew traders from far away. During the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, pioneers paused for a meal beside a makeshift cantina. Thousands flocked to Colorado's mountains, driven by dreams of fortune. U.S. cavalry and infantry once gathered to watch the Indian grass dance, a ritual of healing and resistance performed during the most strained years of reservation life. Tombstone in 1881 was a booming silver camp with more than 100 saloons, brothels, and newspapers. In just a few years, its population exploded from 100 to nearly 7,000 people. In 1894, a towering sandstorm swallowed Midland, Texas. Within minutes, homes vanished under dust, crops were ruined, and families hid indoors for days. Boss Caswell's Monkey Saloon in Granite, Colorado, became notorious for cheap liquor. Packed with miners, it was one of the rowdiest and most dangerous spots in the region. At the Cosmopolitan Saloon in Telluride, Colorado, men played roulette under mounted heads and imported wallpaper. Legend says Butch Cassidy had a drink here before robbing the town's bank. Families in Castlegate lived in the shadow of coal mines, enduring harsh conditions. Even children were sent to work young to help support their struggling households. On a lonely Arizona ranch in 1888, men passed time with poker games outdoors. In such isolated places, gambling was one of the few escapes after long, grueling days of work. Soldiers of the U.S. 3rd Infantry drilled with rifles near Fort Meade, founded in 1878 to protect settlers and stagecoach routes during Western expansion. Bass Reeves, born to enslaved parents, rose to legendary status as a deputy marshal in Indian Territory. Over his career, he arrested more than 3,000 criminals, earning a reputation for courage, sharp intelligence, and fairness. In this 1907 photo, Reeves appears on the left with fellow lawmen, a reminder of his place among the greatest figures of the Wild West. Calamity Jane is seen relaxed with friends in Gilt Edge, Montana in 1897. Famous for breaking social norms, she was remembered as much for her bold adventures as for her fierce personality. At Hiddenwood Creek, hundreds of tents formed a sprawling military camp during a reconnaissance mission led by General Custer. It was part of the preparation for his campaign against the Lakota. In Wyatt Earp's final photo taken in California late in life, he advised Hollywood on Western films. He died in 1929, the last survivor of the OK Corral gunfight. Deadwood exploded in 1876 after the discovery of gold, drawing miners, gamblers, outlaws, and legends like Calamity Jane. The town was lively, dangerous, and without law. Frank Hamer began as a Texas Ranger but became legendary for leading the 1934 ambush that killed Bonnie and Clyde after tracking them for 3 months across 5 states. He also fought the Ku Klux Klan and stopped lynchings, standing firmly against racial violence in the South. In Idaho, a man poses in front of Jackson's bar with rifle in hand. Bars and guns went together, and the constant risk of a drunken quarrel turning into a deadly shootout was always near. Mary Fields, known as Stagecoach Mary, was the first black woman to work for the U.S. Postal Service. Standing 6 feet tall, cigar in hand, and rifle at her side, she never missed a delivery, even in snowstorms. She earned respect by fending off robbers and wolves, and she was the only woman allowed to drink in Cascade saloons. In Colorado, a merchant struggled to survive selling clothes and shoes in a rough settlement. For many, dreams of gold gave way to lives built on trade, mining, or cattle. In the towering pine forests of eastern Salem, Oregon, a family poses proudly in front of their cabin. Years later, the trees would all be cut down and the land converted into farmland. The Tombstone Baseball Club, made up of miners, merchants, and sheriffs, united rivals in the love of baseball. The sport gave ordinary men a break from the violence and chaos of frontier life. Calamity Jane stands beside the grave of Wild Bill Hickok, with whom she claimed a romance. Before her death, she wished to be buried next to him, a request that was honored. At the Shoe Bar Ranch in Texas in 1912, a cowboy separates cattle. Once the open range was divided by fences, settlers grew wealthy by raising herds to feed the growing cities. In Lexington, Kentucky, a customer waits inside Belle Brezing's elegant brothel, famous for hosting politicians and businessmen. Rooms could cost up to $10 per night, a fortune at the time. Buffalo Bill stands proudly with his troupe at the 101 Ranch in Oklahoma. Famous for shows that blended cowboys, Native Americans, and theatrical stunts, turning Wild West myth into grand spectacle. The streets of Tombstone, Arizona looked quiet in 1881, until October's legendary gunfight at the OK Corral, when the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday clashed with the Cowboys. A year later, a fire destroyed the corral, yet even in ruins it became a symbol of the Wild West, and one of frontier history's most remembered events. In Tascosa, Texas, 1907, cowboys gather at a saloon wearing leather vests, fringed pants, and spurs. Practical gear for long rides and tough ranch work. A cowboy gets an improvised haircut outside a cabin in 1908. With no barber nearby, men relied on sharp knives and brave friends to handle the task in frontier style. At Beering Saloon in Michigan, customers played billiards under an ornate tin ceiling, a rare luxury. Beyond drinks, it also served as a hub for secret winter betting. Through mud, snow, and rough timber, Clancy's Saloon welcomed weary miners during Nome's 1897 gold rush. It was where they warmed up, drank, and planned their next strike. At the Ox Ranch in Texas, cowboys paused for dinner in the wilderness. The supply wagon at the center acted as both kitchen and gathering spot. Today, this land is part of Childress. In Perkins County, South Dakota, a settler poses proudly before the cabin he built alone. Many came west chasing the free land offered by the Homestead Act to start anew. Chief John Smith of the Chippewa tribe, nicknamed Wrinkle Meat, was known as one of America's oldest men. Though legend claimed he reached 138, he died of pneumonia in 1922, likely under 100. The Circle City Saloon in Nome, Alaska, bustled with miners and adventurers of the gold rush. Behind it, a steamship arrived with supplies and passengers, the only way into the remote region. Prescott, the capital of the Arizona Territory in 1880, featured broad streets and wooden buildings stretching toward the mountains. The town was filled with political disputes, busy saloons, and frequent fires. Inside this teepee, beds, tools, and belongings are carefully arranged in a circle, reflecting both order and tradition. Structures like this were more than homes. They were gathering places where native leaders met with government officials to hold crucial talks and make decisions that shaped their people's future. Inside the Orient Saloon of Bisbee, Arizona, men wagered on Faro, the Wild West's most popular card game. Despite its fame, it was banned in many states due to rampant cheating. In Humansville, Missouri, 1915, a concert band posed in costumes with instruments. Their shows mixed music, theater, and comedy, often poking fun at Wild West life. In 1869, the first transcontinental railroad united East and West. Built by thousands of immigrants, it cut travel time from months to days and sped up settlement across the frontier. At Nevada's Mountain Edge, a camp beside the Central Pacific Railroad tracks marked both the end of the line and the start of chaos. Tents, trade, and nights heavy with drinking. Teddy Roosevelt stands in the Badlands of Dakota around 1885. After losing his wife, he withdrew westward, living as a rancher and even serving as deputy sheriff, long before becoming America's 26th president. Creede, Colorado became the state's last great silver boomtown in the early 1890s. Its fast growth drew miners, saloons, and notorious criminals like Soapy Smith. At Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Oglala families set up tents outside the government-run Indian school. The photo captures the stark contrast between traditional native life and state-imposed education. John Hoffman's Saloon and Grocery was a frontier classic, selling whiskey and groceries under one roof, saving customers long trips for supplies. In Brown Basin, Arizona, 1908, hunters posed beside their cabin with pack mules and dogs. They hunted for meat and prized pelts from animals like coyotes, wolves, and cougars. Cowboys rest in the shade after hours of dusty labor. Ranch work often stretched to 18 hours a day, so even a can of tomatoes was treasured during a midday break. Prospectors panned for gold in Rockerville, Dakota, their Civil War uniforms traded for mining gear. Many veterans came seeking a fresh start in the Black Hills Rush. The Lakota village of Brule, shown in 1891 near Pine Ridge, sat along White Clay Creek, a place tied to tensions that would later lead to the Wounded Knee Massacre. Guthrie armed Texas Rangers patrolled vast frontiers, often clashing with cattle thieves and outlaws in violent border wars. Their presence was both feared and respected. At J.W. Schwartz Barroom, a shot cost just 12.5 cents. In 1885, saloons like this became gathering places for miners, cowboys, and drifters, offering rest, strong drink, and conversation. The 7 chiefs of the Crow Nation posed together in Montana in 1887. At that time, they were fighting to safeguard their land and rights while facing heavy federal pressure for new concessions. In Rawhide, Nevada, saloons, shops, and wagons crowded the main street during the mining boom. Founded in 1906, it grew so fast that over 5,000 residents lived there within a year. A settler family lived in a tent at 3 Block Ranch, New Mexico, around 1908. For landless farmers, nomadic life was common, as they searched for fertile soil and opportunity. In 1888, Deadwood residents paraded down Main Street to celebrate the railroad's arrival. The new rail line transformed the mining town, linking it to the nation's trade and prosperity. Native chiefs sit in a peace council after years of conflict with the U.S. Army. These agreements followed harsh military campaigns and the forced relocation of tribes to reservations. At the O Ranch in Arizona, Irwin E. Smith prepares breakfast over the campfire. A cowboy and photographer, he captured with sensitivity the daily life of cowhands just before the Wild West faded away. In Humboldt County, California, hunters and travelers gathered at the Table Bluff Hotel and Saloon. Bear and elk hides from nearby hunts often provided both food and decoration for the saloon. In Missoula, John Dunn sips coffee outside his cabin, laundry drying behind him. A carpenter by trade, he also documented frontier life with his camera, preserving images of hardship and resilience. A family toiled in a mine at Cripple Creek, Colorado in 1893. Soon the town would rise as the state's largest gold producer, drawing thousands chasing fortune in the Rockies. 1 in 4 cowboys in the Wild West was black, as shown in this 1913 photo. Many were freed slaves who found rare equality and steady pay working on ranches. The Southern Paiutes' masters of desert survival are seen in an 1874 photo demonstrating traditional skills. They made bows, hair braids, and nets from yucca and juniper fibers. In 1886, accused murderer Blue Duck sits beside Belle Starr during a prison visit. The picture reveals the unusual alliance between two of the Wild West's most infamous names. Corinne, Utah emerged as a rebellious outpost defying Mormon control. As a railroad hub, it earned a notorious reputation, soon nicknamed the most wicked town between Sodom and San Francisco. Eureka, Colorado, flourished with gold and silver mining. By 1900, it boasted hotels, saloons, and a railroad moving ore to Silverton. While one ranch cowboy looked on, the cook tended a fire beside the supply wagon. Meals on the range were simple but cherished. Coffee, beans, and meat were more than enough. In Arizona's desert heat on April 5, 1907, a cowboy paused at a well to fill his barrel, while his horse gratefully cooled off in the rare shade. His first blacksmith shop opened during the 1889 land run, when thousands rushed into Oklahoma overnight. In a single day, the city was born, and tools became vital for the pioneers settling there. Around the fireplace, weary men rested after long work days. Judging by the rifles on the wall, they were ready to repel any thief who dared intrude. Millie Ringgold, a former slave, sought freedom in Montana. She prospected during the 1879 gold rush, then opened a boarding house in Yogo Creek, living on her own terms. In 1948, survivors of the Battle of the Little Bighorn gathered more than 70 years after defeating Custer. Wearing ceremonial clothing, they honored the memory of one of Indigenous resistance's most iconic battles. Cheyenne prisoners were photographed after trying to flee the Kansas reservation to head north. Their attempt became known as the Cheyenne Exodus, one of the best-known native escapes of the 19th century. The famed Calamity. Jane cemented her legend when she guided a caravan 90 miles through hostile territory to Deadwood. After the guide was killed, she took charge, saving every passenger. In 1876, Santa Barbara still resembled a dusty village. De la Guerra Street, viewed from Anacapa, showed a rough frontier town, far from the California tourist image we know today. Men pressed forward through the Arizona desert, laying tracks for a new railroad. Many lines were built by immigrants who endured brutal shifts under scorching sun and unforgiving land. Apache Kid, once a scout for the U.S. Army, became a fugitive. Known for evading every pursuit, his legend only grew after disappearing into the desert, searched for over decades. The peace officers of Dodge City formed an elite force that tried to bring order to a violent town. Among them was Wyatt Earp, who became a central figure in the fight against crime on the frontier. During the Oklahoma land rush of 1889, thousands of settlers pitched tents on native lands, suddenly open to whoever arrived first. About 50,000 people joined the chaotic race for property. Inside Al Elliott's Combination Saloon in Utah, shelves of bottles stood behind tense patrons. Between quiet sips and sharp stares, each man seemed just as ready to toast as to draw his gun. Mining engineers and their wives staged an impromptu concert outside their tent, playing banjos and violins. Many of these professionals had come from the East, hired by powerful mining companies. In California, 1904, settlers crowded a tent to bid for land at auction. Many bought purely from advertisements, trusting promises of fertile soil and new beginnings, without ever seeing the property. Henry Heck, Thomas, one of the Wild West's toughest sheriffs, became famous for hunting the Dalton brothers, breaking up gangs and enforcing law across Oklahoma's Indian Territory. Signs in Dodge City warned that carrying firearms was forbidden. Despite its reputation for shootouts, the town relied on strict laws from the start to keep the peace. Cowboys in 1908 gathered for drinks after long days of work. Many lived season to season, herding cattle or branding, then drifting through towns and saloons in search of work and whiskey. In Guthrie, Oklahoma, an angry mob gathered around the jail, demanding the release of a prisoner. Though the town had no formal government yet, rebellion and unrest were already well organized. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden world of pioneer architecture, please hit that like button to help us uncover more forgotten history. And subscribe and turn on notifications because we reveal shocking truths about America's past every single week. Until next time, stay prepared and stay resilient.